Now it's for part 2. We're going to be applying this cone idea to the eye. And don't worry, we're going to impale this and turn it into an eyeball. Impale? What do you mean impale? Okay, an eyeball is actually more like a cone and a sphere rather than just a sphere. I've laid the cone up on its side. So the reason why I did this is because I want you to think of this cone as a solid form, okay? The form is going down and becoming smaller as it goes into the distance, right? Well, I want for you to now imagine that this cone is actually hollow and you can see through it, kind of like a traffic cone. Okay, so if I were to stripes on it, concentric circles like that, but continue them on the inside, so now this is becoming hollow. It's interesting, it almost appears that it's glowing from in there. Okay, so I want you to imagine it to be hollow, okay? Now, the organic form that I'm actually planning to talk about is the cone that exists in your eye, okay? So the cone that's in your eye is actually your iris. Okay, so we're going to draw right here now the conceptual sphere. So we've got a sphere like this, we've got a circle. We're going to pretend that we have a light source coming down, so coming down in that direction. So I'm going to start by dividing my sphere in half with a core shadow. Okay, this is the ball of the eye. Let's divide it in half. So now that we've established the light and the dark side, we're going to do the core shadow, that rubber band belt, all the way around. Okay, soften that. And then I'm going to pull some of that pigment up and create my halftone, like this. I'll tone the sphere a little bit, just overall. I'm going to darken the dark side a tad. There we go. Now the dark side is darker than the halftone. And then to make the light side look lighter, I'm going to introduce a background, because everything is relative. Okay, so when we talked about the cone, we said that the changing radius impacts the edge quality, okay? So a sphere doesn't have a changing radius, it's perfectly round. And the eyeball is pretty much perfectly round, right? It might have a little bit of distortion, but overall it's going to have an even, soft edge all the way around the sphere. It will only change when its background changes. So if it's a light against a dark, it's going to be sharper, and if it's a dark against a light, it's going to be sharper. But let's say the background was all darker, okay? The shadow side is going to be softer than the light side, and that's just based on contrast. And don't worry, we're going to impale this and turn it into an eyeball. Impale? What do you mean impale? I mean, we are going to take this cone right here, I'm going to take it out, and I'm going to impale this sphere. And I'm actually going to be using one more like this, because I want that hollow inside. Okay, so I'm going to go about 2/3. I'm just going to make a circle. Right about there. The light source is coming in on the right side. It hits this side of the sphere, right? Well, because this is hollow, like this, it's actually going to have a different lighting dynamic. What's happening is the light is going to come in here, and it's going to hit this side of the sphere, but that side of the sphere goes in, right, when it goes into the cone. And so this side of the cone, if we're looking inside the traffic cone, this side of the cone is going to be in shadow. And to make this look more like a cone, let's put the little hole in the tip of the cone. Remember, we're looking inside. The hole could be a variety of sizes. And that hole is literally a hole. That's what you call your pupil. So that is going to be really dark. And then the right side of this is going to be catching less light because the light is coming here. It's going to hit this side of the sphere, not the inside of that cone, and it's going to hit this side of the cone more. Okay, so we're going to lighten the opposite side. Notice how it reverses. The light side of the iris, or the cone, the light side is going to be dark and the dark side is going to be light, okay? And I'm going to make a dividing line, just like this cone when we made the core shadow. It's basically a straight line, okay? So it's going to go wider, thinner, thinner, wider. And actually it'll be relative to this sphere, or this core shadow too. So it actually needs to go at a little bit of an angle. Right now there is no lens. This is the iris. And the iris is a cone and it will change shapes, right? Sometimes the pupil is much larger if the muscles are contracting, and the iris, the color of your eye, is those muscle fibers. And so they contract and they'll get smaller, and the pupil will expand, the hole will get bigger, letting more light in, or it will do the opposite, okay? But really, I think of it as a traffic cone impaled in a sphere. There, now it's sitting on a surface. And depending on the local color of your iris, if you have a dark iris, if it's like brown, right, or a dark gray, well, then this is going to be darker. But if you have light, pale blue eyes, well, then the light side is going to be lighter, okay? And those lines, those striations in the eye are actually those muscle fibers, okay? But you need to make sure that you create those fundamental differences between the light and the shadow before you put any detail on anything. So as I erase these little details of those striations, I'm aware of how light I'm making the dark side, because I cannot have anything on the dark side as light as the darks on the light side. Right now, it's a sphere with that traffic cone being impaled in there, okay? So the center is going to be the darkest part, right? Because it's just a hole. Okay, now let's make the light side look, the dark side look a bit darker. And I'm going to just erase background a little bit, okay? And that way it looks, relative to the background, a bit lighter. This doesn't have a lens on it, that sclera, the protective layer. So by adding that sclera in a drawing, all we're adding is that liquid and spherical shape. So if the light source is coming from this direction, okay, down that way, pointing down and hitting the sphere somewhere around on the right side, there's going to be a highlight. Now that highlight is the exact shape of the light source, but because this is a sphere, the highlight is going to curve. Okay, so let's say our light source was a circle, okay, or a round shape, okay? That means the highlight would be rounded, like a bean, okay? If our light source was rectangular, well, that means our highlight would be curved like that. But the highlight does not have an outline, okay? So rather than drawing with your pencil or charcoal, you're going to be drawing the highlight using your eraser. Now, which side would the highlight be on? It's not going to be on the dark side, let me tell you. It's going to be on the light side, but actually it's really cool. It ends up being on the dark side of the iris. So that makes it stand out even more. It's really cool. I'm just going to make a generic highlight shape, but make sure that it's rounded. And I'm gonna go partially over the dark side and partially over the light side of the eyeball, okay? And it's going to be our lightest light because it's reflecting immediately right back into the viewer's eyes. And what's cool about that is sometimes there will be something blocking the highlight, like maybe a person taking a photo, and you'll be able to see their head in the highlight. And you can continue working into this, adding more of these dark intricacies because each eye has a different local color. Also, the pupil is not a perfect circle. It's actually an irregular, wavy shape. So don't make your pupil a perfect circle. Very few things are perfect circles, perfect round shapes. Okay, so the cone and the sphere and these fundamental forms can apply to a range of subject matter. In fact, everything really can be refined to these fundamental forms. The cube, the cone, the sphere. That's why it's so important to understand how light falls on it conceptually. I made all of these up with no references because I understand them. I recommend that you take out your sketchbook and maybe copy the drawings that I did here today and try to do some just from your mind. Say, okay, we've got a cone with this lighting scenario and no secondary light. Okay, well, it would look similar to that. Or let's rotate the light, keep the cone in the same spot. What would it look like? And then you can start adding fundamental forms together, like the sphere and the cone. Okay, and then you eventually could, maybe I'll do this in another video, add an eyelid on top of the eye. Okay, but it's all facets, it's all shapes, it's all forms. So they're essential to getting better as an artist. And you can only paint as well as you can draw. Okay, when I'm doing this, I'm thinking about painting. I'm thinking about edges. I'm thinking about value control. And I'm also thinking about brushwork. Okay, when I use this thing, it's kind of like a paintbrush, the paper stump. This is such good practice, and I encourage you to not only do that on your own, but try to teach it to someone else. When you teach something, you learn it. Please try this out. Start the video over, watch it all the way through, and then start the video over and draw it on your own. I appreciate you guys watching these videos. I hope you're learning something. Please let me know if you are, or if you're like, man, I am really struggling on ears. Please do a tutorial on ears. I would love to do that for you. Practice your fundamentals. They will really help you in the long run for both drawing and painting, I promise you. If you have any questions, let me know. Like and subscribe. I will see you guys next time. Thank you.